Now we're going to spoon this all into our parchment lined 9x9 baking pan. This is just a glass Pyrex. So this cake, or I should say these bars, are completely flourless. And the only sugar that you're really getting in here is a small amount. If you are looking to cut back on sugar, you can use coconut sugar. You can use maple sugar would be nice as well. Let me just try to get this all in here. Okay. Get all of that out. Come on. Okay. So that's all out. Now I have my oven preheated to 350. But before I do that, the topping is the absolute best part. So what I have here is a mixture of unsweetened flaked coconut. I have dairy-free dark chocolate morsels. I usually just use the Enjoy Life brand, but there's a few of them out there. And then I have a combination of chopped walnuts and chopped pecans. And this will just go all over the top. Okay. So a traditional magic bar, 7-layer bar, you usually do this in layers with graham cracker on the bottom. But since we're making this healthier and dairy-free, we're adding the toppings to the top. Okay, that's it. So now that will go into a preheated 350-degree oven for about 45 minutes. And then at the end, I will be able to show you. You really should let them sit for a little while before you cut into them. You want them to be fully cooled, but I could at least show you how it will come together once it comes out of the oven. Are there any questions before I get into the meatballs? No? Okay. Okay. So Swedish meatballs are something that I don't have very often. It actually reminds me of when you go to IKEA and they have the really yummy Swedish meatballs in the food court there. But Swedish meatballs are, when I think of Swedish meatballs, I think of comfort food, and they are also perfect for any gathering that you might be having of any size, because you can scale this recipe up or down. And I like them because they can be served as an appetizer, or you can make them an actual meal and serve them over a bed of noodles or even mashed potatoes. So what I have here are the meatballs that I've already started to cook for you, because I didn't want to bore you with standing here and rolling all of these. But the recipe is already up on my website, so you can get the full recipe with all the instructions. This is about a pound of ground beef. You could also do a half pound of ground beef, half pound of ground pork, but this is ground beef. In here, I have gluten-free panko, breadcrumbs. There's fresh chopped Italian parsley. There's a nutmeg. Traditionally, you would add a little bit of allspice as well. That's what the traditional flavors are. A pinch of that is all that you need, really. I used 2 teaspoons of dried minced onion because I don't really care for fresh onion in my meatballs, but you could totally substitute fresh, and I would just recommend grating them so that they're really, they melt right into the meatball mixture. You don't want big chunks of onion. I have garlic powder in here, salt and pepper, and a pinch of sugar, an egg, and I just mixed it all together. And I chose to make these small. And then all I did, and this recipe, like I said, is on my site, so you can get the exact measurements. It was about a tablespoon or so of olive oil and a tablespoon of dairy-free butter that I used to saute the meatballs. And you really just want to get them so that they're golden and they have color on all sides. This is the butter that I used tonight that I really love. It's called Miyoko's Creamery. If you're in Nyack, I'm sure it's not hard to find. I think that they have this pretty much everywhere now. I've seen it in just about every grocery store, including Whole Foods, and some of the ShopRites have it. Yeah, Wegmans. I really like it. I've tried a lot of them. I have a lot of customers who are dairy free. And like I said, I do a lot of baking for them. And I've tried quite a few. And this is the one that I prefer. I like the color of it. I like the way it tastes. It's made from a base of coconut and cashew. So if you are sensitive to nuts, that might be a no-no for you. But if you're not, I highly recommend it. My kids even like it on their toast. They really can't even tell the difference. It has a really nice flavor and it doesn't taste artificial. So what I did was I browned the meatballs and then I just set them aside on a paper towel lined plate. And if you can show them, Ava, I left most of the butter and the little browned bits on the bottom because that is going to give our sauce a lot of really nice flavor. So right now I'm going to raise the heat and then I'm going to add a little bit more butter and some gluten-free flour. I'm actually using a sweet white rice flour tonight. I find that if you're going to use an all-purpose flour when you're making a roux, it tends to get a gluten-free flour. It tends to get very gummy because there's a lot of other things added into a gluten-free flour blend that you really don't need in a roux. There's gums in there and things like that. It really just makes it very stringy and gummy. So when I'm doing a roux, I do this when I make my gluten-free mac and cheese. I usually just stick to the white rice flour. And usually it's equal parts butter and flour. So it's about 3 or so tablespoons of the butter. And we'll add about 3 tablespoons or so of the white rice flour. Okay. And you just want to whisk this all together. Now, Swedish meatballs are certainly not low fat. I never claimed they would be low fat. I just said they would be gluten-free and dairy-free. But they're the kind of thing that you have once in a while, right? So you want to get all of your little browned bits of meat up from the bottom of the pan because, like I said, that is what is going to give the sauce a lot of flavor. Let me get this out of the way so that they could see. And you just want to cook it for a minute or two just so that you don't get any raw flour taste. And it really gives the flour a chance to kind of toast and incorporate with the butter. Okay, so once there are no clumps of flour anywhere, okay, and you've gotten all your little bits up, we are going to add 2 cups of beef broth. You could use a bone broth. You could use chicken stock if that's what you have. This is a low sodium organic beef broth, but anything that you have will do. Okay. So we're just going to mix that up a little bit. We're going to raise the heat because we want to bring this to a boil. And then we're going to add Worcestershire sauce and a little tiny bit of Dijon. That just gives the sauce that traditional, you know, sort of umami-ish flavor that Swedish meatballs are known for. And we're going to season with some salt and pepper. And this is totally to taste. Okay. And I usually use sea salt. So I would love to know, whoever is online and joined us tonight, who is gluten-free, who's dairy-free, who's both, or do you have family members who are? You want to put that in the chat and maybe Rosemary can let me know. I just like to get a feel for who's on. And okay, I'm going to lower this down now to a simmer, and now we're going to add the meatballs in. Okay. You can see that the sauce already thickened up. Okay. Let's get these in here. Let me lower this down a little bit more. These are pretty much cooked through already, but you just want to let them simmer in here for a few minutes.
Hey, Danielle.
Yeah.
We have a woman named Jenna who's dairy and wheat free. She just put it in the chat.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you for joining. Let me know if you have any questions about anything I'm making tonight or just in general. Now, I'm going to reintroduce in place of heavy cream or sour cream. So traditionally, Swedish meatballs at the end, once the meatballs get to this point here, the sauce that they're nestled in is typically you add either heavy cream or sour cream, and you mix it in at the end. That's traditional. So since I'm making this dairy free, I've decided once again to refer back to our trusty can of cannellini beans. And I've actually made a puree, and Ava, you could show them. It's sort of loose. This is half a cup of cannellini beans that you can rinse and drain in a small food processor or a little blender. And what I've done is added a little bit of water from the can. I like to kind of shake it around in there so that you get the bits off the bottom of the can into the blender so that you get this sort of consistency where it's pourable and really smooth. And you're going to add this in to the meatball and sauce mixture in place of cream. You can absolutely also use a cashew cream. If you wanted to make a cashew cream, you would soak the raw cashews and then blend them in a high-powered blender with water. If you have like a Vitamix or a Blendtec or a Ninja, you could probably try it with. You could also use a dairy-free alternative that is already prepackaged. I did see one. Stop and Shop does carry the Silk brand of dairy-free heavy cream. I will be honest, I wasn't really a fan because there's just so much other stuff in there that I just really don't even think is necessary or necessarily healthy. So that's the thing. I would much prefer to do this and know that what I'm eating is healthful than buy a product that's already, you know, marketed as an alternative that may not be as good for you, if that makes sense. Okay, so we're just going to let this go another second. And I promise you, you're not going to get that overwhelming taste of bean in here. It's cannellini beans are amazing because they really just take on the flavor of whatever it is that you're cooking them with. And they're so creamy, and they don't have, you know, like a tough exterior to them or a tough skin. They're very soft. They're not like a chickpea or like a kidney bean is definitely like a harder bean. That's pretty much it. I'm going to get my plate over here. Okay. And this made quite a bit of sauce. So you can absolutely get more meatballs covered in this sauce. This was a pound of meat, but I think that you can probably fit more meat in here and have enough sauce. Okay. Now, if you are making these ahead, I did put a tip in my recipe that I wrote up on the blog. You can make the meatballs ahead of time, but I would suggest making the sauce right before you're ready to serve it, just because it will tend to stiffen up a little bit and you want it to be nice and loose. And then what I like to do is, oops, that's a lot of parsley. That's okay. I like to just garnish with a little extra parsley. And those are the gluten-free, dairy-free Swedish meatballs. Okay. I am going to move this pan out of the way. It's pretty hot. Bring this one over. So you can't talk about comfort food without talking about wings. And you can't really talk about football, right? Super Bowl Sunday without talking about wings. So what I've created is a very crispy, gluten-free chicken wing. And I just want to get this stuff out of the way. Okay. Put this here. Okay. So traditionally, a gluten-free chicken wing, you could dredge it just in egg, and you can do an all-purpose flour, or you could try to do the breadcrumb. I find that it just kind of falls off. The breading just kind of falls off. So I created a little bit of a different method of doing it here. It's a 3-pronged approach when it comes to the dredging and the coating. And then obviously you want your oil to be pretty hot so that everything gets really nice and brown and crispy on the outside. So I have a candy thermometer actually in here. And this is a Dutch oven that I filled not too far, a couple of inches or so, a few inches. This is avocado oil, which I like to use when I'm frying. It's just healthier. You could also use canola oil. You could use grapeseed oil. You could use vegetable oil. I prefer avocado oil because it's healthier. So what I have to serve with the wings is an herbed ranch dip. It's actually a little bit more like a dressing. You could use it for both. You could use it as a dressing, and I have on salad, or you can use it as a dip for the wings. You could use it for chicken fingers. It would be delicious. So what I have here is a cup of mayo. I have a half a cup of coconut milk, and this is full fat coconut milk. There's a combination of chopped fresh Italian parsley, fresh chive, and fresh dill. And then I've got some crushed garlic in here. And I'm going to add a little bit of sea salt. Okay, and onion powder, which I forgot. Just bear with me. Okay, so it is a half teaspoon of onion powder. So that's going to give you that classic ranch flavor. Okay, so we're going to pour the coconut milk in there. It's about a half a cup. And I probably should have used a slightly larger bowl, but that's okay. And you just want to give this a whisk. And I mean, this dressing literally came together in seconds. It's so delicious, and you can store it in the refrigerator for at least a week, if not longer. And look at that. It's full of the fresh herbs. I like to use chive because I find that it's a milder onion flavor, and my kids will actually eat it as well. I find that green onion sometimes could be a little bit overpowering, so I like the chive and I use it a lot, and it's delicious in dressings. So that's the dressing or dip. While I have this heating, I'm going to talk about what I did for the chicken wings. And I've gone ahead and started them ahead of time just so that I didn't bore you to death. But what I have is, this is a little over a pound of chicken wings. I leave the skin on, but I usually just trim off like the excess, pieces of like skin that sometimes hangs. And if it's like very fatty, I'll just trim that off. And then what I like to do is lay it on a plate with paper towel, just so that it's not wet when I'm ready to start dredging it. And so my mixture for the dredge is threefold. So I do, again, the sweet white rice flour, and I season that with salt and pepper, paprika. I really like the flavor that the paprika gives, and it gives it like a nice pink color. And I add 2 teaspoons. This is about a cup of white rice flour. I add about 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And what the baking powder does, I know it might sound strange because most people think of baking powder in like breads and muffins and cookies. It actually helps with browning. So that's why I added that in. The second part of the dredge is coconut milk again, and it's full fat coconut milk. I usually buy the Goya brand, but there's tons of them out there now. I personally like the Goya because when you shake it in the can, you don't get any of that funky separation where the milk or the water goes to the bottom and you have that real thick layer on the top. There's absolutely a time and place and need for that thick layer of coconut at the top. But when you're baking or using it like this, you just want it to be as easy as possible. And I find that brand shakes up and emulsifies really well. And then over here, the final crunch factor. This is what really makes it taste and feel like a traditional crispy chicken wing that you would get from, I don't know. I haven't eaten a chicken wing out in so long. A Planet Wings or a Kentucky Fried Chicken is gluten-free cereal. This is a corn and rice. It's kind of like a Rice Chex, if you will. This is actually a Stop and Shop brand. It is corn and rice. I just like the way it tastes. I like the crunch that it gives. I take it, I put it into my food processor, and I just whiz it up until you get almost like, like a coarse sand consistency. You could also, if you can find gluten-free cornflakes, they're not always easy to find, and regular cornflakes are not gluten-free because they do contain malt in them, which is usually derived from barley. And so I stay away from them. But sometimes you can find like the Stop and Shop Nature's Promise is usually a gluten-free alternative to cornflakes. You can use those if you can find them. So what I did most of them. The oil is almost where we want it. You want it like between 320, 325, 330-ish, just because you don't want it to get so brown on the outside and the inside of the chicken wing is, still pink, because these need to fry for about 8 minutes or so. So what I do is I dredge it first, and this is why it's important for the chicken to be dry. So that's why I like to pat them and let them drain a little bit on paper towel. Then you're going to put it in your coconut milk. Now, if you don't have coconut milk, you could also use egg. But I liked the idea. I created this recipe because I liked the idea of, a traditional chicken wing or fried chicken, you would soak in buttermilk. But since this is a dairy-free version of a chicken wing, a fried chicken wing, I decided to go with the coconut milk. If you really like that tang from buttermilk, you could also add a couple of teaspoons or so of vinegar to your coconut milk, and it'll give you the same basic effect as actual buttermilk. Okay, so my oil is good. I'm actually it's gonna come down a little bit when it's gonna come down a little bit in temperature once I add all this, or I'm not gonna add all of it, but once I start adding the food in there. And some of these are bigger than others. So yeah, for this size Dutch oven, I have about 5 or so in here. And it's going to take, like I said, I'm going to do it, a few minutes at least on each side. It's usually about 8 minutes. And you just want to keep an eye on your oil temperature, because if it drops too low, what happens is it doesn't get crispy enough on the outside. And that's when your breading can start to slip off of the wing. Let me just take a peek. We have about 19 minutes or so left on the Blondie bars, which if you do make them, I would suggest keeping them in the refrigerator. Not only are they easier to slice that way, they just stay fresh longer, and they're delicious cold as well. I've actually had them for breakfast. Are there any questions while we're hanging out and waiting for the chicken to be all fried up?
Someone in the chat said, I love family members that are gluten-free, not celiac. I am not gluten-free, but pretty much eat that way since I'm cooking for everyone.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm the only one in my household who is celiac. And so my husband and my 3 kids are not, but my nephew is as well. So when I have the family here for a holiday or a birthday or any type of gathering, I make everything gluten-free. And nobody at this point can even tell the difference. It takes a lot of trial and error. I'll be the first one to admit that. Not everything comes out as you expected it to. And there are certain things that you can taste that don't taste like the real thing. But if you enjoy being in the kitchen and you enjoy experimenting and you have patience, then you can really make just about anything gluten-free and have it taste just as good, if not better, than the real thing. So, I mean, I definitely cook gluten-free. Dinner every night is gluten-free. just so that I can enjoy it as well. And I don't have to worry about making 2 or 3 separate meals for, to accommodate everyone. And I've been celiac, geez, over 20 years. When I was first diagnosed with the celiac antibodies was way back in the late 90s. And back then there was absolutely nothing. It was the most horrific variety of gluten-free anything. And over the years, it's just, so many more people are gluten-free for various reasons. It's not only celiac, there are other things, other autoimmune diseases that require people to eliminate gluten, or some people just eliminate it for, other reasons. So it's much easier to find stuff, and you can go to any regular grocery store now and find just about anything. This is just a spider. I like to use this to turn when I'm frying because the oil drips out really nicely. It drains off from the bottom. So you can see, Ava, I don't want you to get burned with oil, but you can see that they're really nice and brown on the outside. And obviously the smaller wings are going to cook, faster, and they'll cook through quicker. If you were going to try this with full-size chicken legs, I would definitely fry them a little bit slower and longer, because that's a thicker piece of meat and you want to make sure that it's cooked all the way through. You could also, if you were doing a large amount of these, or you wanted to do them with chicken legs, you could fry them till they're almost done so they get that real crispiness on the outside. And then you could probably finish them in like a 350-degree oven. Just cover them with foil so that they don't get like burnt on the outside. And then that would cook them through the rest of the way if you wanted to do like a larger piece of chicken. Any leftovers you can keep in the fridge, obviously. The meatballs, I will say, you could make the meatballs ahead of time and freeze them, which I love to do. You could freeze them raw if you wanted. Just put them on a baking sheet lined with wax paper or parchment. Freeze them for about a half hour to an hour until they're really solid. And then you can put them into like a freezer bag. That way they don't all stick and clump together in the bag. Or you could cook the meatballs, freeze them, and then when you're ready to make the Swedish meatballs, if it's a weeknight and you're short on time, you can just pop them out of the freezer, thaw them, and then make your sauce and add everything in, and you would have dinner on the table very quickly. So
Danielle,
yeah.
We had a question. Someone was wondering if all this information is available on your blog, your website.
The Swedish meatball recipe is up, and I did put some of my tips in there. The chicken wing recipe is not up yet, but I will put it up, and I can put all the tips and stuff in there as well. Absolutely. And you can email me also. It's thecraftyhostess@gmail. So feel free anytime you have a question. If you're making one of my recipes and you have a question about it, or want to know how you can make it ahead or how it can be frozen, I like to try to include all of that information when I write the blog post. But if there's something that I may have forgotten, you can just email me and okay.
Yeah, I put your email address and your blog address in the chat for people.
Okay, so just for purposes of time, and I don't want to bore anybody with me standing here frying all of this. some of these may not be fully cooked through yet, so I'm going to give them a few more minutes. But I mean, you can see, and they're crazy hot right now, so I don't want to burn myself, but I mean, you can see how crispy that is. The breading did not fall off, and the key to that is making sure that the chicken is dry before you start dredging it in the flour. Now, you could also make this without the cereal. So let's say that you are in the mood for chicken wings and you just don't have, a cereal that would work for you, right? In your pantry. And by all means, like, we're not going to the store as much as we were before. So you could eliminate that. It's not going to be as crispy. It's not going to give you that real like Kentucky Fried Chicken sort of crunch on the outside, but it would still work perfectly fine. You would do the coconut milk first and then the flour, and then you would just put it into the hot oil, and it would still be absolutely delicious, but you just won't get that crunch from the cereal. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put a couple more in here. My oil is at just over 300. So it's still okay, and it smells so good in here. And I hope my husband is happy when he comes home and sees that he's having chicken wings for for dinner tonight, because that's what he's having. He won't eat the meatballs, but he'll eat the chicken wings. And then, serve it on the with the ranch on the side. It's absolutely delicious. You can't go wrong. Again, this is perfect for Super Bowl, perfect for a weeknight. You could make this even, I mean, I don't know, what is everybody doing for Valentine's Day this year? It's on a Sunday, and I feel like we should support local businesses and maybe order takeout, or go someplace where you can feel safe eating. But if you choose to stay home and make your own food, why not make something simple where you don't have to be in the kitchen for too long? You can make something like this and everybody can enjoy it. Now, if you cannot have coconut milk, I don't know too many people who are allergic to coconut. One or two people in my lifetime that I've met in my experience and travels that is allergic to coconut. You could use any dairy-free, or plant-based milk that you like. Really, anything would work. I like just the thickness of the coconut milk, but you could absolutely use like a cashew milk would be good. Cashew, I prefer over almond milk in certain things, just because it has a very neutral flavor. You could try the oat milk also if you can tolerate oats. The oat milks out there are a good alternative, and they're creamy like coconut milk. So it really it'll stick to the chicken well. Yes, Ava. You could use, my oil temperature is dropping, so I'm going to raise this up just because I've added now 5 or 6 pieces of chicken in here. My oil temp is starting to drop, so I raised it up. So it's helpful to have a thermometer like this that can hang on the side of your pot, just because you can monitor the temperature of the oil, and it sort of takes the guesswork out of it. I have a recipe on my site for a gluten-free zeppoli, which I do in this Dutch oven as well. And I always keep the thermometer on there because you really want those to be nice and brown on the outside. Somebody had a question, or my daughter was asking, if you don't like cannellini bean, what can you use? Are you referring to the Swedish meatball recipe? Any white bean, will work. You can absolutely use any white bean. You can even thicken sauces. It's going to sound crazy, but you can thicken them with rice, white rice that's been pureed with a little bit of water. So you want to cook the rice, and then you can add it to a food processor with a little bit of water, and you can actually thicken with that as well. So if you can't do beans, or you don't like beans, or you don't have beans, you can do that as another option. Oh, we're good. Let me show you. We have about 6 or so minutes left on the blondie bars, but I just wanted to show you in case anyone has to jump off before we're done. You can see that it's puffed up nicely and brown all around the edges. The middle is still needs to be set some more. So we're going to leave it in for the remainder of the time. Okay. Oil temperature is going back up, but I'm going to give these a turn. So what oils do you usually fry with? Do you guys use avocado oil? Are you using canola or vegetable oil? If you want to let me know in the chat. I know avocado oil is definitely a lot pricier. Oh, come on, this guy doesn't want to turn for me. It's definitely a lot pricier than canola or vegetable oil. I actually get it at Costco, and it's a big 2-liter bottle of it, and it's just right around $20, which is a good deal. Rosemary, are you gluten-free or dairy-free or plant-based?
I am vegetarian.
Okay.
I was vegan for a while. And not gluten, well, sort of gluten-free. I don't need to be,
Okay.
but I definitely feel better when I don't
Yeah.
eat it. So I try to avoid it, except for maybe special occasions.
Okay.
And same thing with dairy. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of customers who are arthritis sufferers, and so they've eliminated, gluten and dairy tend to cause inflammation in the body, and so people do eliminate it for those, or cut back on it for those reasons. If you get joint pain or even headaches, you know,
Yeah,
there are,
that's my main reason for avoiding it is not so much joint pain, just aches and pains,
okay,
migraines, and I just notice that I feel better when I don't
yeah,
eat it overall. I have more energy too.
yeah. I mean, I try as much as I can to make everything from scratch rather than leaning always on the prepackaged gluten-free stuff that's on the market, because if you really take the time to read the ingredients, there's so many other things in there. So, like I said earlier, if you have the time, the patience, and the interest, you can make so much of this stuff homemade and eliminate a lot of the other things that they add in to make up for what's not in there, if you know what I mean.
Someone said they went gluten-free and dairy-free after doing a whole 30 and finding out they caused my lumpus, I think it is, to flare badly.
Lupus.
Yes.
Lupus. Oh, okay. So how long have you been gluten-free and dairy-free now? Chat? Okay. Yeah, I know. I know quite a few people. I've read stories and talked to people who did Whole 30 And, you know, it just kind of helped to reset their system. And then they realized things about their body after they completed the Whole30. So, I mean, in that sense, Whole30 is definitely a great way to kind of reset yourself because you're eliminating so much. Okay. Just for the fact that it's coming up on the hour mark, I am going to take these out. Okay. Did she get back in the chat, Ava? And I'll throw the last 3 in.
3 years.
Oh, okay. So the last 3 are in. These are draining on paper towel. They should be fairly cooked through, but I may just pop them in the oven just so that they're warm for when my family will eat them later. And yeah, this just needs another minute or so, and then these should be all ready to go. I'll try to get the chicken wing recipe and the dipping sauce up as soon as I can. And the Swedish meatball recipe is already up. Any other questions or thoughts? Okay, let me see here. Looks good. And this will continue to firm up as it cools. So if it still looks a tad bit jiggly, which actually this is not, don't worry about it. And you can see, I'll just shut the timer so it doesn't interfere, how beautiful that is. Nice and golden brown. You have the nuts, the coconut, and the chips on the top. And I would definitely suggest letting this cool fully. I know it's hard because you definitely want to get into it while it's warm. But it will, the cutting of it will be much easier when it's, you know, fully cooled to room temperature. And then store any leftovers if there are any in the fridge. So that pretty much concludes my program for tonight, Rosemary. I don't know if you had anything to add or if there were any last questions or comments for me about any of this or anything in general with regards to cooking gluten-free or dairy-free.
Well, I'll make sure that everyone who registered, because not everyone who registered was able to come. I'll make sure they have your website and your email address, if that's okay with you, so they can
Sure.
check out the recipes.
Yeah.
I was wondering, do you have a brand of, especially with flours, gluten-free flours that you recommend?
Sure. I do make a lot of my own flour blends. Just because I've been doing it now for so long that certain things work better for me when I make them myself. But with regard to an all-purpose gluten-free flour blend, I usually always use King Arthur. I like the Measure for Measure, which contains the xanthan gum. So it is truly a one-for-one substitute for regular all-purpose flour. But there's other good ones out there that, you know, King Arthur is, I would say it's for the quality of the flour, it's more affordable than some of the others. But, you know, like Cup for Cup is another good one, but definitely pricier. So I usually use the King Arthur. If you're in a pinch, you could use the Bob's Red Mill. I don't care for the one that's in the red bag with the red label. I usually just use the 1-for-1, which is like a light blue colored label.
Kathy is having the Swedish meatballs for dinner,
Oh, nice. Did you make them, Kathy?
and the magic bars are in the oven.
Awesome. That's great. If you would be so kind as to let me know what you thought once you eat them, that would be great. I love to have feedback. You could actually go onto my blog and post a comment. I think the comments are turned on for the Swedish meatball recipe. Okay, so I'm going to take this out. And I mean, even if you guys don't make the fried chicken wings, make the herb ranch dressing / dip. It is so good. And you do not taste coconut in there at all. You would never know that this is dairy free. I wanted to point out, I did use Hellman's mayonnaise in here, the one that has the olive oil in it. If you are vegan, you can use any vegan mayo substitute, you can substitute the regular mayonnaise that I used for any vegan mayo. I know there's like a Vegenaise. I believe Primal Kitchen makes a pretty good one that I've had before. I don't know. Are there others, Rosemary, that you usually gravitate toward?
Yeah, I've used Trader Joe's. I don't know if they still do, but they used to have a really good vegan mayonnaise that I
Oh, okay.
used. I think they still have it. Sometimes they don't have it in stock, but it's really good and it's
Yeah, I
inexpensive.
love Trader Joe's. I just wish there was one closer.
Yes, we all do.
Yeah, it's just such a pain to, it's really not that far, but it's an ordeal, especially for me. I have the 3 kids who are homeschooling, and I'm trying to work, and so to get to Trader Joe's is not easy for me. But I have found Whole Foods through Amazon Prime is fantastic if you have not tried that.
Everyone's saying that it was awesome.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining tonight. And if you make any of these or any of the other recipes, please let me know. I am also on Instagram and Facebook. My handle for both is @thecraftyhostess. So you can see what I'm working on, what I'm making, what I'm offering. I always have specials for holidays and things like that, with menus of things that I'm offering for Valentine's Day and so on and so forth. So yeah, thank you again. This was great.
Thank you, Danielle. It was wonderful.
Night.
You too. Good night,
Thanks.
everybody. Thanks for coming.
Good night.